There exists, within the infinite archives of the Akashic records, whispers of a remarkable secret. A single sentence that Edgar Cayce, the legendary sleeping prophet, discovered could instantly unlock the heart chakra. This revelation wasn't shared widely during his lifetime, but was documented in private sessions with his closest students. What if the key to experiencing profound spiritual connection was not years of meditation, but instead a simple phrase that realigns our entire energetic being? Today, we explore this hidden teaching and how it transformed Cayce's own spiritual journey, allowing him to access unprecedented levels of compassion and healing ability. What was this mystical sentence, and why did Cayce believe it held the power to revolutionize human consciousness? The year was 1931. In a modest home in Virginia Beach, a small group had gathered around a simple wooden table. The air was thick with anticipation, as Edgar Cayce, already known for his remarkable psychic abilities, prepared to reveal something he had never shared publicly. A journalist who had traveled from New York sat across from him, notepad ready, having convinced Cayce's secretary to arrange this rare private interview. "Mr. Cayce," began the journalist, adjusting his spectacles, "you've helped thousands with your readings, but I'm curious about your own spiritual practice. What personal techniques do you use that might not be recorded in your public sessions?" Cayce smiled gently, his eyes reflecting a depth that seemed to reach beyond the physical room. "You know," he said, leaning forward slightly, "there's a difference between the information I channel while in trance and the practices that have transformed my own consciousness. The most powerful of these is remarkably simple. A single sentence that, when properly understood and felt, instantly activates the heart center." The journalist's eyebrows raised. "A sentence? Just words can accomplish what most spiritual practitioners spend decades trying to achieve." "Not just words," Cayce replied, his voice taking on a rhythmic quality. "Words carry vibrational frequencies. When aligned with truth and spoken with genuine intent, they can literally reconfigure our energetic anatomy." He paused, studying the journalist's expression. "Are you familiar with the chakra system?" "Only in passing," admitted the journalist. "Energy centers along the spine, correct?" Cayce nodded. 7 primary centers, each corresponding to different aspects of our physical, emotional, and spiritual functioning. The heart chakra, what Eastern traditions call anahata, sits at the center. It's the bridge between our lower and higher nature. When blocked, we experience separation. When open, we experience oneness with all creation. The journalist scribbled quickly. "And you found a verbal key that unlocks this center?" "I have," said Cayce, his expression growing more serious. "But before I share it, I must emphasize something crucial. This isn't a magical incantation or spell. Its power lies not in the words themselves, but in the state of consciousness they evoke when truly understood." "I understand," the journalist assured him. Cayce studied him for a moment before continuing. "My journey to this discovery began during a particularly difficult period. I was struggling with the growing public attention to my readings, facing skepticism from the scientific community and questioning my own purpose. During one of my meditative states, not a full trance, but a light contemplative state, I was shown a sequence of symbols that, translated into English, formed a simple sentence." "And what happened when you first used it?" asked the journalist, leaning forward. Cayce's eyes grew distant, remembering. The physical sensation was immediate, a warmth that began in the center of my chest and expanded outward. But the emotional and spiritual effects were far more profound. Barriers I didn't even know existed suddenly dissolved. I experienced a level of compassion that transcended any personal limitations. The journalist had stopped writing, caught up in Cayce's narrative. "What exactly did this enable you to do?" "It transformed my healing work entirely," Cayce explained. "Before, when giving readings, I functioned primarily as a channel. Information flowed through me, but I remained somewhat separate from the process. After activating the heart center through this practice, I began experiencing a direct empathic connection with those I was helping. I could feel their conditions within my own energy body, which dramatically increased the accuracy and effectiveness of the healing information. "That's extraordinary," whispered the journalist. "And this sentence, can anyone use it?" Cayce smiled. "That's the beautiful truth of it. This isn't exclusive knowledge reserved for the spiritually advanced. It's a birthright of every human soul, though its effects will vary based on one's readiness and intention." "Can you share it now?" asked the journalist, pen poised. Cayce closed his eyes briefly, as if consulting an inner guidance. "I was instructed that when sharing this, the recipient must be in a receptive state. Are you willing to set aside analytical thinking for a moment and simply receive?" The journalist nodded, setting down his pen. "The sentence is this," Cayce said, his voice taking on a resonant quality that seemed to fill the room. "I am love expressing itself as this human experience, connected to all that is." There was a moment of profound silence. The journalist's expression shifted subtly, his features softening. "Could you explain how this works?" he finally asked, his voice quieter than before. "The power lies in the recognition of three fundamental truths," Cayce explained. "First, that our essential nature is love itself. Not that we have love or feel love, but that we are love in our most fundamental form. Second, that we are expressions of this love taking human form temporarily. And third, that we remain connected to the entire universal field of consciousness, what some traditions call God or Source. But how does saying or thinking this sentence actually open the heart chakra?" pressed the journalist. "The heart chakra responds to truth," said Cayce. "When we acknowledge our true nature, even momentarily, the heart center naturally expands. Think of it like this. Imagine a flower that closes at night. It doesn't require complicated techniques to open. It simply responds to the presence of sunlight. Our heart center operates similarly, opening naturally in the presence of spiritual truth." The journalist retrieved his pen. "Could you elaborate on how this sentence changed your personal experience?" Cayce nodded thoughtfully. "Before discovering this key, I experienced what many do on the spiritual path, moments of connection, interrupted by periods of doubt and separation. My psychic abilities operated somewhat independently from my everyday consciousness. But after regularly working with this sentence, the boundaries between different states of awareness began to dissolve." "What do you mean exactly?" asked the journalist. "Most people experience life in compartments," Cayce explained. "There's their spiritual self, their work self, their family self, all seemingly separate. When the heart chakra fully activates, these artificial divisions begin to dissolve. I found myself maintaining a continuous connection to higher guidance, even while engaged in ordinary activities. The information in my readings became more integrated with my conscious understanding." "Did this create challenges as well?" the journalist inquired perceptively. Cayce's expression grew momentarily somber. "Yes. An open heart doesn't shield you from the world's pain. Quite the opposite. I became more sensitive to the suffering around me, more aware of humanity's collective struggles. There were times when this sensitivity was overwhelming." "How did you manage that increased sensitivity?" "That's where the third part of the sentence becomes essential," Cayce replied. "Connected to all that is reminds us that we're never alone in bearing these experiences. The same connection that allows us to feel more deeply also provides the strength and wisdom to navigate those feelings. I learned to trust that whatever I was experiencing was flowing through me, not becoming stuck within me." The journalist considered this. "Do you recommend people use this sentence as a form of meditation?" "It can be used in multiple ways," Cayce said. "Some might repeat it as a mantra during formal meditation. Others might write it down and contemplate each segment separately. But I've found the most powerful approach is to speak it aloud, with full presence, during moments of challenge, when you feel disconnected, fearful, or closed. Those transition points are when we most need to remember our true nature." "Have you taught this to your students?" asked the journalist. "To some," Cayce acknowledged. But I've observed something interesting. The same sentence affects different people differently, based on which aspect they most need to integrate. For those who struggle with self-worth, "I am love" creates the most profound shift. For those caught in excessive self-focus, "connected to all that is" provides the greatest opening. What about the middle part, expressing itself as this human experience? Inquired the journalist. Cayce's eyes brightened. That's the bridge that many spiritual seekers miss. Some become so enamored with transcendent states that they devalue their human journey. Others become so caught in human concerns that they forget their spiritual essence. This middle recognition honors the purpose of our incarnation, to express divine love through human experience, with all its messiness and limitations. The journalist paused, reflecting on this information. You mentioned earlier that the sentence was shown to you as symbols first. Can you describe these symbols? Cayce shook his head slightly. The visual language of the soul realm doesn't translate well into words. The closest comparison might be sacred geometry, combined with light frequencies. What matters isn't the original form, but the resonance it creates when translated into language we can use in daily life. Have you found that different translations work better for different people? Asked the journalist. Absolutely, Cayce confirmed. The exact wording isn't what matters. It's the conceptual trinity of identity, expression, and connection. In my work with people from various backgrounds, I sometimes adjust the language to better align with their understanding. For those with Christian backgrounds, for instance, I might use "I am divine love," expressing through this vessel, united with God's creation. The journalist nodded thoughtfully. You mentioned the heart chakra is the bridge between lower and higher chakras. How does opening this center affect the entire energy system? That's an excellent question, Cayce said, leaning back in his chair. Think of the chakra system as a flowing river. When there's a blockage in the middle, it affects everything above and below. The 3 lower chakras govern our basic survival needs, physical vitality, and personal power. The 3 higher chakras govern communication, intuition, and spiritual connection. When the heart remains closed, these 2 realms operate separately, creating a fragmented experience. And when it opens, prompted the journalist. When the heart center activates, Cayce continued, life force energy flows freely between all centers. Our physical needs and spiritual aspirations no longer compete, but complement each other. We bring spiritual awareness to mundane activities, and we ground our spiritual insights in practical application. This integration is what many traditions would call wholeness or healing. The journalist appeared deep in thought. I'm curious about the physiological effects. Did you notice changes in your physical health after working with this sentence? Cayce smiled. Indeed. The heart chakra doesn't just affect our emotional and spiritual state. It influences the physical heart and circulation, the thymus gland, the immune system, even our breathing patterns. After regularly practicing with this key, I experienced improved circulation, greater respiratory capacity, and a strengthened immune response. My sleep became more restful, and I required less of it. That's remarkable, said the journalist. Could this have implications for treating physical ailments? The potential is significant, Cayce acknowledged. In my readings, I've often emphasized that physical conditions begin with energetic imbalances. By directly addressing the heart center, which influences both physical systems and our emotional response to illness, we create conditions more conducive to healing. The journalist scribbled notes rapidly. Earlier you mentioned this was something you discovered during a difficult period. Was there a specific catalyst? Cayce was quiet for a moment, his gaze turning inward. There was. During the early years of my work, I encountered a woman with a condition that had baffled numerous physicians. Despite multiple readings, she showed no improvement. This troubled me deeply, as I felt I was failing her. What happened? Asked the journalist gently. One night, after a particularly discouraging session, I entered a meditative state and sincerely asked for greater understanding. That's when the symbols appeared, eventually forming this sentence. When I worked with it, I realized something profound. I had been trying to heal her from a place of separation, seeing her condition as something external to myself. After activating the heart center, I understood that true healing doesn't come from one person doing something to another, but from recognizing our fundamental oneness. "And did this help the woman's condition?" the journalist inquired. "Yes, remarkably so," Cayce said. In our next session, rather than approaching her as a subject to be diagnosed, I maintained awareness of our shared essence. The information that came through was qualitatively different, more precise, more holistic. She began improving within days. The journalist sat back, absorbing this. "It sounds like this approach fundamentally changed your understanding of healing itself." "It transformed everything," Cayce confirmed. "I came to see that all healing, whether physical, emotional, or spiritual, ultimately involves reconnecting with our true nature. The heart chakra is central to this process because it's where separation consciousness dissolves into unity consciousness." After a thoughtful pause, the journalist asked, "Have you found any resistance or challenges when sharing this practice with others?" Cayce's expression turned reflective. "The most common obstacle is intellectual skepticism. The modern mind wants complex solutions and detailed explanations. There's often disbelief that something so simple could be so powerful. But this simplicity is precisely what makes it universal. It doesn't require special knowledge or years of practice to begin experiencing its effects." "Are there any preparations or prerequisites before someone tries working with this sentence?" asked the journalist. "Only willingness," Cayce replied. "Though I do recommend a few moments of quiet breathing beforehand to settle the mind. The effectiveness doesn't depend on believing it will work, only on being open to the possibility and speaking or thinking the words with sincere attention." The journalist nodded, then asked, "You've given thousands of readings on diverse topics. Where does this heart chakra activation fit into your broader understanding of human spiritual evolution?" Cayce leaned forward, his eyes brightening with enthusiasm. "I believe we're entering an era where humanity will shift from knowledge-seeking to wisdom embodiment. For centuries, spiritual development has been approached primarily through the accumulation of teachings and techniques. But the coming age will emphasize direct experience through the heart center." "Why the heart specifically?" asked the journalist. "Because the heart is where apparent contradictions reconcile," explained Cayce. "The mind categorizes and divides, the heart unifies and integrates. As humanity faces increasingly complex challenges, solutions won't come from more sophisticated thinking, but from a more comprehensive way of knowing that includes emotional and spiritual intelligence." "And this sentence is a tool for that transition?" the journalist clarified. "One of many," Cayce acknowledged. "But it's particularly valuable because it bridges ancient wisdom and modern understanding. It doesn't require adopting specific religious beliefs or cultural practices. It speaks to universal human experience." The journalist paused, appearing to gather his thoughts. "I have to ask, if this approach is so powerful, why isn't it more widely known? Why haven't you shared it more publicly?" Cayce smiled gently. "Timing is essential in spiritual matters. Some teachings are most effective when discovered at the right moment in one's journey. I've shared this with individuals who were ready to receive it, and now, it seems, a wider audience may be prepared as well." "What indications do you see of this readiness?" asked the journalist. "The questions people are asking have changed," Cayce observed. "A decade ago, most sought practical advice or physical healing. Now, increasingly, they're asking about purpose, connection, and expanded consciousness. These are heart-centered inquiries that signal an evolution in collective awareness." The journalist nodded thoughtfully. "Throughout our conversation, you've emphasized that the power isn't in the words themselves, but in the consciousness they evoke. Could you elaborate on that distinction?" "Of course," said Cayce. "Words are vessels for meaning and energy. The same sentence spoken mechanically, as mere sounds, will have minimal effect. But when spoken with presence and receptivity, it becomes a living key that unlocks corresponding vibrations within us. It's similar to how a tuning fork causes another of the same frequency to vibrate when brought near. The words attune us to the frequency of our true nature. So, intention matters, the journalist concluded. Intention, attention, and reception, Cayce clarified. Intention sets the direction, attention provides the energy, and reception allows the transformation to occur without resistance. The journalist glanced at his notes. We've discussed how this practice affects individuals. Do you see broader implications for collective consciousness? Cayce's expression grew more serious. The heart chakra is not only our individual center, but the connective point between people. As more individuals activate this center, we strengthen what might be called the collective heart field of humanity. This has profound implications for resolving conflicts, addressing shared challenges, and evolving as a species. That's a hopeful vision, remarked the journalist. Hope itself is a heart quality, Cayce replied. Not wishful thinking, but the deep knowing that we are more than our current circumstances suggest, that we contain within us the seeds of our highest potential. The journalist was quiet for a moment, then asked softly, "What happens after the heart chakra opens? Is that the end of the spiritual journey?" Cayce laughed gently. Far from it. It's more accurately the real beginning. With an open heart, the higher chakras can activate safely, bringing expanded intuition, clearer spiritual vision, and direct communion with the divine. Without heart opening first, attempts to activate these higher centers can create imbalance, psychic experiences without compassion, or spiritual knowledge without wisdom. You mentioned earlier that this sentence helped integrate your psychic abilities with your everyday awareness, the journalist recalled. Could you share more about that process? Before this integration, Cayce explained, my readings came through me but weren't fully accessible to my waking consciousness. It was as if different parts of myself were operating independently. As the heart center opened more consistently, these aspects began to harmonize. Information began flowing more continuously, not just during formal readings. My intuitive awareness became more available during ordinary interactions. Did this change how you conducted your sessions? Asked the journalist. Significantly, Cayce nodded. I became more directly engaged in the process, more present with those seeking help. Rather than withdrawing completely into trance, I maintained a thread of conscious awareness. This allowed for more dynamic readings that could respond to the person's immediate needs, rather than following a prescribed format. The journalist appeared deeply engaged. Throughout our conversation, you've described the heart chakra as a bridge or connecting point. I'm curious, does working with this sentence also affect one's connection to the natural world? Profoundly, Cayce affirmed. The heart doesn't only connect us to other humans, but to all living beings. After regular practice with this key, many report heightened sensitivity to plants, animals, and natural environments. They perceive the aliveness in all things and experience a dissolving of the artificial boundary between human and nature. Have you experienced this yourself? Inquired the journalist. Yes, Cayce replied, his expression softening. There was a particular oak tree near my childhood home that I would visit. Before my heart opening, I appreciated its beauty, but saw it as separate from myself. After working with this practice, I began perceiving its consciousness, not anthropomorphized as human-like thinking, but as a distinct mode of being with its own awareness and rhythm. These experiences have deepened my understanding that consciousness isn't exclusive to humans, but is the fundamental fabric of reality itself. The journalist sat back, considering all he had heard. After a moment, he leaned forward with what seemed to be his most important question. Mr. Cayce, after years of giving readings on countless subjects, what do you consider the most essential truth that this heart-opening sentence reveals? Cayce closed his eyes briefly, as if listening to an inner voice. When he opened them, they held a remarkable clarity. That separation is the great illusion. We experience ourselves as isolated individuals, separate from each other and from the divine source. This perception creates fear, which manifests as conflict, greed, and suffering. The heart chakra is where this illusion dissolves, revealing that we have never been separate, that love is not merely an emotion we feel, but the very substance of what we are. And this understanding, the journalist said slowly, this is what changes everything? Yes, Cayce said simply. When truly realized, not just intellectually grasped, but directly experienced, it transforms how we perceive every aspect of existence. Challenges remain, suffering continues in its season, but our relationship to these experiences fundamentally shifts. We no longer face life's difficulties as isolated entities, but as expressions of a vast, intelligent love that is continuously evolving through our unique journeys. The journalist sat in silence for several moments, his pen still. Finally, he asked, if someone were to begin working with this sentence today, what might they realistically expect? The effects vary widely, Cayce answered. Some experience an immediate physical sensation, warmth in the chest, tingling, a sense of expansion. Others notice subtle emotional shifts, increased patience, spontaneous compassion, reduced reactivity. For some, the changes unfold gradually over weeks or months of practice. What's most important isn't the immediate experience, but the commitment to continued exploration. Any final advice for those who will read about this practice? Asked the journalist. Cayce smiled warmly. Approach it with both sincerity and lightness. The heart chakra responds to authentic intention, but constricts under pressure or expectation. Allow whatever experiences arise, whether dramatic or subtle. And remember that this sentence isn't meant to replace other spiritual practices, but to infuse them with direct heart connection. As their conversation drew to a close, the journalist set down his pen and met Cayce's gaze directly. I came here seeking information for an article, but I've received something far more valuable. Thank you. That's the nature of heart wisdom, Cayce replied gently. It transforms both giver and receiver, reminding us that ultimately, we are one consciousness exploring itself through countless forms of expression. The profound wisdom Edgar Cayce shared about the heart chakra reveals something extraordinary about our human potential. When we truly understand that we are not separate beings striving for connection, but are instead individualized expressions of a unified field of love, our entire experience transforms. The sentence, I am love expressing itself as this human experience, connected to all that is, serves as both affirmation and reminder of our true nature. This understanding resolves the apparent conflict between spiritual seeking and human living. We need not abandon our humanity to achieve spiritual growth, nor sacrifice spiritual awareness to fully engage with life. The heart chakra, when activated, allows these seemingly opposite aspects to integrate into a harmonious whole. This is why Cayce considered this practice so essential. It addresses the fundamental misperception that creates suffering in human experience, the illusion of separation. The beauty of this approach lies in its accessibility. Unlike complicated techniques requiring years of practice, this recognition is available to anyone willing to pause, breathe, and open to their true nature. The heart responds instantly to authentic truth, expanding naturally when we acknowledge our fundamental essence as love itself. Perhaps most significantly, this understanding reveals that the challenges we face, both individually and collectively, aren't obstacles to our spiritual nature, but opportunities for its expression. When we approach difficulties from heart-centered awareness, we bring a qualitatively different consciousness to problems that cannot be solved from the same level of thinking that created them. As we conclude this exploration of Edgar Cayce's profound insight into the heart chakra, I invite you to experience this practice for yourself. Take a moment now to breathe deeply. Center your awareness in your chest, and silently or aloud, with full presence, speak the words, I am love expressing itself as this human experience, connected to all that is. Notice what shifts, however subtle, in your perception and feeling. Thank you for joining me on this journey into one of Edgar Cayce's most transformative teachings. If this resonated with you, please share your experiences in the comments below. I read every single one and deeply value your insights. Your engagement helps these timeless wisdoms reach others who may benefit from them. If you found value in today's exploration, please consider liking this video to help it reach more people seeking similar understanding. And subscribe to our channel for more discoveries from history's greatest spiritual teachers and their often overlooked wisdom. Remember, the greatest spiritual truths are not distant ideals to be achieved, but present realities waiting to be recognized. You are, in this very moment, exactly what you seek to become.